All right. Hello, everybody. Back when I started off in ministry, I was real fortunate. I was working with a mega church that was, rapidly expanding. And we had a custom developed church management system, which we really needed at the time because we were really early into the small groups thing and doing that. And there wasn't great ways to track that back then. But I remember we had staff that were devoted just to getting in there and doing the coding and everything to make sure that we could do that. And it was a huge blessing because our church was growing and we were able to track people. And, I remember every week sitting down at the church management system and going through and adding people and checking up on records so that I could call people and do things like that. And it was a huge boon to our actual ministry practice. Well, typically, since that time, I usually would have told somebody when it comes to custom developing software or customizing any kind of software, I'd probably usually tell them, no, you shouldn't do it and you should avoid doing that. And there's a lot of reasons. And usually that's because, most churches aren't fast growing mega churches. Most churches don't have the types of resources or expertise that would be needed to make that return on investment make sense.
It's too expensive, man.
But over the last few years, we've seen more and more emergence of what's called low-code and no-code systems. And in particular, because all churches get the Microsoft 365 business premium donations, all churches have access to free low-code and no-code systems, particularly through the Power Platform systems. Now you're probably wondering, well, what good could this actually do for my church? What would it actually accomplish? And what it would actually accomplish is you can start automating away some of your tasks. That's at the basic level. Start focusing more on like discipleship tasks. But as you move further and further down along the line, you can get better analytics, understand what's going on in your church, identify problems when they're about to crop up. And if you've got processes that just aren't being covered by a church management system, you can supplement and take over some of that within low-code applications that you build. And they really can be built these days by anybody in your church, whether it's a secretary, whether it is the children's pastor, anybody can do it. All they need to do is be able to work with, say, a spreadsheet as a data source or anything like that, and they can import and start working with that. So let me tell you a little bit about the Microsoft Power Platform, just because that's what's going to be available to you guys. That's what I recommend you guys start working in, especially since there's something called Dataverse in the background there. And I think if you start storing data eventually in Dataverse, I think you're going to be set up well for your future, especially in being able to track and monitor what's going on in your church and start developing those apps that'll really take things like discipleship forward. So the first part of Microsoft Power Platform would be, and the place that I would tell you to get started would be called Microsoft Power Automate. Power Automate used to be called Flow, and so it's really based on these things that we still often refer to as a flow. And what it is it's kind of like an if this happens, then that happens type of logic engine. And so what it can do is say a YouTube video like this one gets created. Well, it detects it and then it can do another action, like it could send out an email or it could, post something to your website. So there's a variety of things it can do. And what's really powerful about it is that it will work with just about anything that is inside of your Microsoft 365. So you can cause things to happen within teams. You can cause a team to be created. You can cause a new file to be created and things to be put into the file. You can create items on a list. You can create a new task in Planner. So there's all kinds of stuff that you can do based on one action and then another action happening. And one of the most immediately helpful things is often to use it for approval flows. So, somebody does maybe enter something in a form. That form kicks off a Microsoft flow. That flow kicks off an approval. The approval, if it's a yes, it does one thing. If it's a no, it does a different thing. So there's all kinds of really cool stuff you can do. And it really does free up a lot of those monotonous tasks if you go out and make use of it. So I'm a huge fan of it. I love to use it whenever I can, or whenever it looks like it's going to help, especially church administrators, because I love church administrators. They're always my besties whenever I'm in a church office. Love hanging out with them. And I love helping them out with just automating these little tasks like that to make their lives a little better and free them up to do all the other stuff they do. So next up, there is Power Apps, which is kind of the proper one, and everybody kind of thinks of when they think of Power Platform. Power Apps is incredibly powerful as well, and no, it's not so much apps on your phone, although it can do that. Think of it a little bit more like in the old school days of Microsoft Access. It's a little bit like that. You can use any type of backend as usual, but you can kind of manipulate and work with and view data kind of like it is a database, and kind of like it is Microsoft Access for all intents and purposes, kind of in the cloud first era. In fact, nowadays you can actually migrate straight from Microsoft Access into Power Automate. So over the last, I don't know, maybe like 5 or 6 years, 7 years, maybe even, I was telling people, don't create an Access database, focus in on Power Apps. This is exactly why, is because Microsoft is very intent on moving everybody off of Access and out into that cloud space and using Power Apps. And there's just so much you can do with Power Apps because it works with Power Automate, it works with Power BI, it works with all the Power Platform, and you can interact with all kinds of other stuff. Like you can pull data in from your church management system, see it in Power Apps, manipulate it, work with it, do whatever you need to do with it, shoot it back, shoot it to another application. There's just a ton that you can do with Power Apps, and the sky's really the limit with it. In fact, you can put a Power App inside of a team, which at first you might be thinking, well, why would I do that? But you can do cool stuff with it. HR apps, you can do leave request apps, you can do volunteer management apps. There's just a ton that you can do with it. Moving forward, we also have Power BI, and the BI stands for Business Intelligence. So what it is it's really for analytics. So if you're like me, you're probably disappointed in most church management systems when it comes to their ability to visualize data and give you reports that you can actualize and work off of. Now, Power BI, because you can actually aggregate data from all over again. So it can be from your church management system. You can be pulling data from your Power App. You can be pulling data from some spreadsheet somewhere. You can pull from all over the place, kind of stick it all in there, and you can have a dashboard, whatever. So the finance department can actually be updating a spreadsheet or something. It's pulling in that data. Just the discipleships team has the data coming in off the church management system of of how many people are attending their small groups. This is all stuff going onto the senior pastor's dashboard, and he can just see from a glance, yep, we're doing okay here, we're doing okay here. Whatever metrics that he also wants to look at and check, these are things that you can do with Power BI. So it's really handy as part of that larger Power Platform, and really makes for a handy way to create more robust apps as you kind of start to glue all these little pieces together that way. One that's there that a lot of people don't realize is there, and it's very powerful, but it's a little bit trickier to use because you have to have some imagination with it, is called Power Virtual Agents. And Power Virtual Agents are these chatbots that you can kind of build, and they're super easy to build, but most people don't kind of realize that they're there and how to use them. So you would usually use them inside of Teams. So you'd create a basic chatbot. For example, it could be HR based. And so if you're like me and you're someplace, you always forget, like, where's the HR stuff? How do I do a request for leave? Stuff like that. It's easy to forget how to do it because you don't do it that frequently, right? Well, this is a great opportunity to do like a chat bot. So you just go into that team, you say, I want to take leave, type it in. The chat bot will just see the fact that somebody's talking about leave, and it'll ask questions. So it could come in and say, hey, what day do you want to take leave? And then how long, or what type of leave is it, or whatever kind of questions it needs to do to fill that out and send it over to the HR department. And again, if you're doing something like flows or something, you can kick off an approval request. So can approve or deny, and then something else can happen based on that. So really, really powerful, really handy. It can go outside of your staff and volunteers and things that are inside your team. It actually can be put on Facebook. It can be put on your website. However, it does get a bit cost prohibitive at that point, because it tends to be a little bit priced more so for large enterprises than, say, your average church. There is a very new product called Power Pages, I believe is what it's called. And it's, again, more for like public facing. However, again, the pricing on it's still a bit of a challenge. Hopefully it kind of democratizes more and comes down, because it's really aimed, again, at the enterprise. However, there's a ton of opportunity there if it gets some better pricing that's a little better for smaller organizations, because there's a ton of potential there for churches. Otherwise, right now, you kind of have to deal more with, say, Microsoft Forms on the public facing, or potentially like Kaizala or something like that, because actually you can kick off all kinds of stuff on the Power Platform through Kaizala, which is kind of like WhatsApp. But it's more popular in developing countries like India than, say, most of the Western countries or highly developed countries where WhatsApp is more popular. Now, as you go further along into kind of this app development process, and remember, this is no-code app development, so you don't have to code at all. It's just kind of sticking blocks and pieces together to interact with things, or the software itself just sees what type of data you have and sets up the proper entry elements and areas for it. So it's super easy to work with. But as things go forward, what you're going to see more and more of is like AI usage. AI is already part of Power Platform. Again, it's a little bit of a cost issue, but if you wanted to go totally Black Mirror in your church, and you're a fan of that type of stuff, and you're not afraid of people mentioning your church and Black Mirror in their same breath, well, you can do stuff like you can measure the sentiment of your parishioners' social media posts. Like, you can actually track down and look for, okay, is Bill very negative when he's on Twitter, or is he positive when he's on Twitter? And how does that reflect on his discipleship? I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying we actually have the tools to go out there, and you and I could sit down in about an hour and have this working and doing and tracking your parishioners and what the sentiment of the stuff that they post is.
I've woken up in a Black Mirror episode.
So that's really just to say, look at how much power is actually at your fingertips in terms of capability to do stuff, that you can just very quickly prototype something, put it together, and have it working in a way that does make an impact, or would give you information that you could use in your church. Way down the road, I suspect that we'll actually see that kind of flip-flop from the church management systems being the core to actually the Power Platform, Power Apps, Dataverse, these kinds of things becoming the core of which we run our churches off of. Because other than the children's ministry check-in, most of the stuff is very easily replicated, very easy to do. So really, any church could go out there and very quickly, rapidly prototype their church management system and not have the same costs that they used to have with all of the maintenance and programming and security issues, stuff like that. That all goes out the window with that no code, low code. It's just a matter, somebody else is maintaining it, somebody else is taking care of it. You're just dealing with what type of data goes into it and how the data looks when it comes out. That's all you have to worry about. So those church management systems, they should be nervous, because the only thing keeping them in play really at this point is that children's ministry check-in.
Oh, stop. Think of the children.
And once that children's ministry check-in problem is solved, or if that becomes just an external piece that you can interact with via APIs and whatnot, so that it becomes a Microsoft Flow thing. The church management system is not a necessary thing anymore, and you can instead focus on how does your church do it? How does your church do the processes? What's unique about your church? And focus in on that and make the apps that interact with your membership data and trends and things like that. That's going to make a huge difference in your church. All right. That's all I have for you today. I hope that's been helpful to you. I hope that you're inspired to get out there and start looking at and working with low code and no code apps within your church. Even if you don't work with the Microsoft stuff, there is other options out there. There's Airtable, there's Zapier. There's other stuff that you could work with, but I'd really encourage you to take a look at what's available to you with the Microsoft Power Platform. I hope you guys have had a great week. I hope you guys have a great week coming up, and there'll be a few additional videos on the sides. If this video has helped you, go ahead and click the like and subscribe. That helps me, and it helps encourage me to make more videos. All right, have a great week, and I will talk to you guys next week.